Welcome back to our journey through and voyage through the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew's Gospel, of course, is 28 chapters, and since we are in chapter 13, we are more or less in the middle of things. Matthew chapter 13 and verse 44, and I'm going to be reading from the King James Version or the Authorized Version. Matthew chapter 13, one verse and one parable, short one. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hid in the field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for great joy thereof goeth, and selleth all that he have, and buyeth the field. This is one of those parables that has a base in reality. Now, in order to understand this parable, understand what we are dealing with in the ancient world. In the ancient world, there were not banks and not banking chains. So if you had coins, money, you had stuff of value, and an invading army was coming your way, what would you do? Well, you did not have a strong box, a safe deposit box. You did not have somewhere in a bank to squirrel away these possessions. The go-to method in that sort of situation and circumstances was dig a hole and bury it. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. One is if you got killed or died, nobody might know where you put the stuff to begin with. I mean, obviously, you're not going to tell people where you buried your treasure because that's kind of self-defeating. The second thing, of course, is that you might just simply forget. In the haste of the moment, you might think, "Oh, this is a swell place to place it," and then simply forget, or simply forget how many places you buried treasure. It is possible that what Jesus is referring to in this parable is to a man who had rented a field. Now, think of a large landowner who has several fields, and so he would rent out a field to somebody to farm it. And so this person is farming one day, or more properly speaking, tilling the soil, when he stumbles across this buried treasure. So he looks at this and realizes that if it's not my land, it's not my treasure. So he re-buries the treasure and then proceeds to mortgage what he can, sell what he can, and take the rest to the pawn shop. He then goes and buys the land. Notice one thing that would bring a smile to the audience. Logically, it would be pretty difficult to just turn around and buy the land and then produce the treasure. If you are buying land from a powerful landowner, that's not the way to gain influence and friends. So there's a little bit of element of humor within this parable. Parables, in that sense, are not meant to be dissected logically. If you try to take them to the full end, you can run into problems. The person in question, though, understood the treasure was worth the sacrifices necessary to get it. He knew that he could not wait to make the decision to buy that property. The challenge for proclaiming the gospel in a place where the church has been present for centuries is to get people to actually hear the gospel. What happens is that a cultural approach or view of the faith develops. In simple terms, there's a lot of phrases biblically, especially through the King James Version, that have entered mainstream English language. They do not have any sense of impact on us because we have heard them and heard them again and again. When people hear a parable like this short one, what is heard is often determined by cultural mindset. So people do not hear the sense of urgency that within this parable. People do not hear the value of what is offered. People do not comprehend the type of sacrifice that one would be prepared to make to buy that land to get that treasure. What people think is maybe, since I said a sinner's prayer, that is enough. Or I went up to the front of the church after a service to accept Jesus, and that is enough. They have, as it were, a defensive wall that protects them against the claim of this parable. The reality is that the church is only as strong as the sacrifices that the people of the church make. If I have a high paying job with job security and a house paid for, how much sacrifice is it to say I will tithe 50%? If I say I will do short term mission work when I retire with a full pension, how much sacrifice is in that? If I say I will go to Bible college when the children are finished college, how much sacrifice is in that? I'm not saying that just because we make a great sacrifice, we are holier than other people. Don't misconstrue me. What I'm saying is we can do things that on the surface look sacrificial, but we have all sorts of built-in securities, or we have done things in such a way that the risk to us is minimized. What I'm saying is that our faith has value and worth as it actually cost us something. If our faith really does not cost us anything, what value does our faith really have? Now, notice it's not the sacrifice, it is ultimately about the response to faith. And in the above illustrations, I'm not saying you just go out and do these things. I'm saying as you are led by the Spirit and you seek the will of God, if that is of God, you go and do that. But what we are talking of is that faith that is real and genuine in some sort of ways always involves a sacrifice and a real cost. Real faith leads to real sacrifice.